I've got the spots, the sickness. There's the twins in my brain.
Welcome to today's episode. This is a new podcast, the first episode, performance podcast. The first guest is Stijn Steels, and we're going to talk about performance in cycling in general. What food to eat, supplements, training, performances of Vingegaard in the time trial. Based on data, who we think is going to win the Vuelta. Everything that has something to do with performance is a topic in this podcast. Welcome to today's episode, Stijn Steels.
Hi, hello everybody.
The first question is not about data yet, but about you. How you were a cyclist with Sport Vlaanderen first, and then you went over to Roompot and then to Quickstep. Tell us a bit more about what kind of rider you were in your career.
Well, I started first at Crelan Youthony, which probably was the smallest pro-continental team of Europe. And then after that, I went to Sport Vlaanderen, a team where all young guys, young talents can develop themselves. But now you must those 2 years, the first 2 years I was there, we were able to win the Europe Tour, so we were quite high level. A lot of the guys became really good pros. And then after some years, it was quite soon clear for me that if I wanted to build up a nice career, I had to try to be a good domestic. So in that role, I got on the radar of Verandas Willems, where they signed Tim Merlief and Wout van Aert as team leaders.
Yeah.
And then I was here. I could ride here for them. Then of course there were some transfer troubles, and we were they merged together with Roompot. And then after the Roompot year, I could ride 3 years for Quickstep, but always as a domestic rider.
Yeah, I think myself included, a lot of people underrate how a high level being a domestique in World Tour is. I tweeted something about Justin Wolff a month ago, I think, about how I think that he would be a very good domestique for Bora. But it seemed like that I underrated how hard it is to get in the final of a Grand Tour stage to be able to deliver that domestique work, because in the early stages of even a sprinter stage, it can be really tough.
Yeah, if you want to be a good domestic, you also have to produce numbers. It's not all about the numbers, but for example, when I had to control in classics, for me, after mostly my job was done after 3 hours and a half, and for that I had to produce as normalized power 380, 385, and that is with a neutral zone in it. So even a domestic must be able to produce high numbers, which is, I think, to be a World Tour rider, it's clearly underestimated what kind of effort it takes. Sometimes I read about guys who ride in continental teams, and you see some discussions from they should be able to go World Tour, but the level in World Tour is so high that you never can't underestimate things. But of course, it's not only about producing the watts; it's also producing them in the right moments, but also have the tactical view, know when to push hard, know when you not have to push hard. You must be able to ride in the peloton, what maybe is one of the biggest misunderstandings, that it's quite hard. Sometimes you see big talents and they in field tests they produce the big numbers, but in the peloton they can't produce any results because they're always at the critical moments. They can't feel the rhythm of the peloton. Sometimes it's just about hitting high numbers for 2-3 minutes, but if you're not in the right moment at the right spots, you will never produce. You will never play a significant role in a team, and that's also important.
I think a good example of that is Jay Vine. Like his watts are insane. He shared them until the Vuelta last year, and was really insane watts because the watts were already a very high level, but apparently I used the too high weight, so they were even better. But he would, yes, all the qualities for to be a good GC rider. He also has a very good TT, but he is just so bad at bike handling. Like every descent, he has to use a lot of energy, and that's if he would go for GC, that's also always going to cost him. So that's a pity.
Vine is a special case because he already has quite a huge palmarès, but still you see that's a guy, he can produce numbers, but he has almost zero bike handling skills. I think he crashes 1 out of 3 races. He crashes, which is really dangerous for him, also dangerous for the peloton itself. But he has the advantage. He's such a good, physically such a strong rider that he still can produce the results. But you have other guys on Zwift that also are unbeatable when it's just about the numbers, but they don't have the skills to place themselves in the peloton. They don't know how to ride the bike. They don't know how to descend, and they can produce numbers, but they never get into the finals just because of their positioning.
It's such a big factor. Like even if I do a group ride of 30 kilometers average, and I ride close to the wheel, I can ride in a group pretty well, I think, but other guys can't, and they so in corners they are far behind. They don't ride close to the wheel, and even at such low speeds, there is a big difference in my average watts and their average watts. So if you look at that for a whole race with 45 kilometers an hour average, that's such a big difference.
Correct, but it's not about pushing the watts. It's just about being in the right place at the right time. Especially in races in Belgium, Holland. It's almost all the time. It's determined by 3 minute effort. And if you're well placed during that 3-minute effort and you can choose the watts, you're in the final. If you're bad placed, you're stuck behind the rest, and it's not. I think some followers always overestimate the importance of the really high watts. Of course, it does matter in mountain stages, and like in Tour de France this year, you see to get in the breakaway, you must have the numbers, but the knowledge how to race and just feeling how a bunch is racing is equally important than just putting on watts.
That's a good moment to talk about how you trained. I think in the earlier years of cycling, like Eddy Merckx, Roger de Vlaming, they trained 5 hours and they went full gas from beginning to the end. And now it's extremely polarized. Did you feel that evolution in your career too, or?
Yeah, for me it was a bit different than all other riders because in the past I did athletics and I was also a track rider, and the knowledge of training was in both track cycling as in athletics was, I think, they were like 10 years earlier than how they train on the roads. When I started my first years, indeed, there were a lot of pros who just said, say we're gonna do a 5 hour, and the only thing that matters was the average speed in the end. But I quite soon skipped those trainings. Even on training camps with the other guys, when they did another 5 hour ride, I did my own training of 2 hours where I went to a little hill and I sprinted up 10 times and I went home. And they said, you only trained 2 hours today. What's wrong? But I knew I had produced more quality than the other guys. So I was always a bit earlier than most of the guys in the training development. But also for me, let's say in hours I produced the last year, maybe my volume was maybe 25-30% higher than it was in my first year of professional cyclist. So that's it. The intensity I already had in my first years, but the total volume went up. So that was for me the biggest difference. But I think the way, also in the beginning, I was also in smaller teams, so that's also a bit hard to compare. But I think the level you were of, the level they controlled you made also a big difference. The last year at Quickstep, every training was monitored, and in the first years you could do whatever you want. As long as you were at level in the races, it was fine. And what you did at home, it didn't really matter for them.
It really goes far with polarized training these days. I wrote an article about Victor Kampenaerts before Omloop het Nieuwsblad, and he doesn't even do threshold anymore. He only does or zone 1, zone 2, or full out, nothing in between. Did you also do that, or did you still do some thresholds because you needed to chase the break?
When most of my efforts were also allowed. The company is a little bit more extreme in those stuff. I did a lot of VO2 max intervals. It was kind of my favorite training session, and I think I did it twice a week. But I did it in combination. I never did only VO2 max, but for example, I did 3 sessions of 10 minutes, 30-30s, and then I mixed it with in between one session of like 5 or 6 minutes at threshold, just to make a little switch. But pure threshold training, where I did really long efforts at threshold. First, it's already hard to do it in Belgium because on flat roads, it's almost impossible. And also, I didn't need it. When I was last year's, or I had to control a bunch, but I knew my aerobic capacity was quite enough to do it for a long time. Or I needed to be in the lead outs, and then I needed to have those really hard impulses. So I did both of them. So VO2 max, allowed training, sometimes a little bit of thresholds, and all the rest was really easy pace.
Okay, so that's about the same as Kampenaerts. I think the only thresholds effort you did was a 20-minute test, like 2 or 3 weeks before Omloop het Nieuwsblad. It was just a test from Lotto to test every rider, a 5 and 20-minute test.
Yeah. Also, it also did, I always checked what's my job during the next weeks or months, and I trained for that. I wasn't made to. For me, it was never a goal when I needed to race in Spain in the mountains. I knew normally there would never be a problem to finish a stage. So I never trained to go all out for 20 minutes, but I knew it was important to have my 1 minute power, my like seated 30 seconds. I did really a lot of times, and I needed to course, at first you need to base, but you practice it all winter to have the right base to build up your training. And then I just trained for what was needed during the races. But like the long threshold training for me, I never had to do it in a race, so I didn't train for it.
About testing, how did Quickstep test their riders? Like in January, all teams always test their riders to see where they are. How did Quickstep do that?
First in winter we did some indoor testing, but also it was like also for cardiac results. So that's based on the indoor tests. We took them before the first training camp in December, and then during training camps, we always had one test day, and it started always with a 3-minute all-out session, just to look at your anaerobic power, and then about 45 minutes later, you had to do a 15-minute test to determine your threshold. And I did it on both days, so you were sure your anaerobic power or anaerobic energy was exhausted after the 3-minute test. And then when you did that 15 minutes, you had it was a quite correct result. And that we repeated it 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah, about emptying like your anaerobic capacity. A lot of people nowadays do a fresh 20-minute test and they multiply that with 0.95 and think that's their FTP. But you need to do a 5-minute pull-out efforts first.
Yeah. Because in the beginning, I also didn't know it. So when I was back with Tos for Vlaanderen, we did a 20-minute test. And then we also took 5% off. And then we had our anaerobic threshold, but you had results that were impossible to do. You got the result, but you knew that it's impossible to have these numbers. And so it's first you need to do an all-out test. And then you feel when you do the longer test of 15 minutes or 20 minutes, you just feel you're already, you can't go over the limit. And that makes the value way more accurate.
Yeah, I had the same. I also did it like that in 2021, I think. And then I went on endurance rides, like 4 hours, and I was completely empty. But yeah, that's not the purpose of endurance ride. I was just riding at zone 3 for 4 hours.
Yeah, but I also think you need to be careful with your zones. For me, even when I did tests all the time, I had numbers that were. I think it's because you're during a test, maybe you're more focused or something like that. But my numbers during tests were always like 10% higher than I expect them to be on training. So even when I started training, when I did sessions, most of the time I started my session with a 20-minute effort that felt quite comfortable, but I didn't look the numbers. And after it was just next to the canal, 20 from sometimes it was 20 minutes, sometimes 22, 23. And then I had my number, and then I know, okay, today I have about this. These are my watts today, and then I counted a bit on them. But I think it's always dangerous if you compare yourself always to a test of one day. It's always difficult I think it's a bit risky. So the feeling, how you feel on the bike, is also important to determine what numbers you will push.
Yeah, because like you say, it's the best to ride a bit on feel too. I think if it's hotter, it's way tougher to push out watts. You need to go a lot slower on endurance rides, or when it's cold, that can mess up your lungs. So you need to go slower too. Feel is more important than what your GPS says.
In the end, I always found it nice to check the watts afterwards. Also during all-out efforts, sometimes I really did my sessions and I pushed the laps, but my watts weren't shown on the bike. But then afterwards, I had like when I did I had a training, it was the most bizarre training I ever did, where I did 7 times 3 minutes VO2 max, but just how I felt. But the difference between all the efforts was like 2 watts, so it was perfectly balanced. While I didn't saw my numbers, but that's the way you learn to train. So, and then of course I had a power meter since I was 16 years old. So if you ride 16 years with power and data, and you know a bit how it works, but
Yeah.
I think for me one of the biggest lessons for young cyclists is train with it, but also learn how your body feels during the efforts, so you're not lost when your power is out. You still must be able to produce the same training, and just check afterwards how your numbers were, and then I think that gives a better your training will give better sensation. I think you will train more effective than you're just when you're focused on the numbers, but you don't realize how your body feels during the efforts.
Yeah. Another example for that, last summer I wanted to do some tempo efforts, zone 3, and it was like 35 degrees, so I was doing what should be zone 3 for me, but yeah, I
Probably
was
impossible to do.
yeah, exactly. So in
Yeah,
cases like that, you need to, yeah, if you know your body a bit, just ride on what feels like zone 3, and that will
yeah,
probably be better than riding like holding that amount of watts, because yeah, that's not good training then.
yeah, of course, of course. And then afterwards, you do have a lot of software where you compare watts to heart rate, and they give you numbers, and so afterwards you always have a good. It's important to check it afterwards so you know what you've actually done, and if you overdone yourself, you can compensate it with the next days. But if you just focus on watts alone, it might be you do the wrong sessions in the end. And also, there's so much difference in between power meters, and so
Yeah,
you always adjust the what you produce in the race. It's really important, but you always must remember it's just a tool, and it also has it's not perfect. So it's a guideline, but it's just the stress you put on your body is still the most important than just the power output on your pedals that's shown on your device.
yeah, like I remember Tao Geoghegan and Tijmen Arendsman in Valencia, I think, so really early in the season, so they are not in top shape yet. Tijmen Arendsman even said he was overweight at the moment, and both their power meter sets that they rode at 8 watts per kilo for 15 minutes.
Yeah,
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 yeah, that's yeah. Some power meters are just yeah better than others. I make analysis on Twitter, and yeah, I did a lot of analysis already, so now I know which power meters are to be trusted. So some power meters are just so inconsistent. Like that's yeah.
But in the end, as long as they always, it doesn't really matter if they're 2% or 3% or 5% off, as long as they are consistent in the way
And being
they're
wrong.
of the
Yeah.
limit, then there's no problem. But that's what makes it always. That's what makes it difficult to compare watts between riders, because even if you have a power meter from the same company, it still can. It's never completely the same with everybody. But as long as the power meter is consistent on its own, you can trust it. You have your numbers from the tests, but never compare it with other riders, or you won't have big difference. But when there's a difference of 5% at 500 watts, it's 25 watts. It's a lot of. So
Yeah.
you are missing. And then you heard guys, yeah, I pushed so many watts and I pushed so many watts and I was dropped, and I say, no, yeah, I pushed 50 watts less and I was in the bunch, so there was no prize. So it's always a difficult discussion.
talking about what's on the 20-minute test, Pogacar posted on Twitter that he did his best threshold ever in the last stage from the Tour, and I thought, 20 minutes on in the Vogesen stage. I thought, sounds right, and then I saw the date, and it was for the Champs-Élysées stage. I was like, huh? Yeah, okay, he rode a strong stage. Like Fred Wright said that he was going so hard that it wasn't, it was crazy. But yeah, how can you explain someone doing his best hour on the Champs-Élysées?
Well, it's clear the most underestimated stage is last hour out of the Tour de France. You say Champs-Élysées goes so hard, but still I think it's quite impossible for a guy like Pogacar who races all out in the mountains to produce it. Even Champs-Élysées as a downhill part, so I think maybe it's a bumpy road, so maybe that gives some false information. But I wouldn't trust it. It would be, he pushed a lot of watts, but it would be quite strange if that was his best efforts. I think when he does TTs or when he goes like when he won in Paris-Nice beginning of the year with all 20-minute efforts, 20-minute climbs. Normally, I think he produced more than he would have done during the last stage of the Tour.
Yeah, exactly. Like he had to be doing like 20 minutes at 7 watts per kilo in Champs-Élysées. Like he rode fast, but not that fast.
No. I think then you clearly win the stage when you can do that. you will win the stage with quite a big margin, I think.
Exactly. Talking about the Tour, I think we have to talk about Vingegaard in the time trial. A lot of people accused him of doping just because he rode a fast TT. Like, as you were in the peloton, you have a better view on how insane that performance is. Can you tell a bit more, like, what you think about that?
Well, I think it's one of the biggest achievements there's ever been on a bike in the last 20 years. I think probably everything went perfect, probably. But it's a bit silly to. It's always strange when guys say, "Yeah, it's doping. It's just one day," or I don't think there's something that can make you so much better in in one day. So I think that's a bit silly, but I think it's performance. We talked about it. I think the final climb he did. I talked about it with other cyclists, and if we the watts per kilo he produced, and we put it to our weight, and we said, yeah, maybe we can do it like 4 minutes, and we're out. So it was really impressive performance, and it shows what kind of an incredible athlete he is. And I think to other GC riders who want to match him, they will have a big task to try to complete the gap.
I think UAE is already a very professional team, but Jumbo, that's just another level. Like, if you saw how Vingegaard was taking that corners, how he sits on his time trial bike, that's almost art.
It was perfection, eh? It was perfection what they did. I think maybe every guy has sometimes in his career when he say, this was the perfect day where everything went as planned. And I think for him that was the day. I think it's clear they invested a lot of time and energy in the TT. And if you beforehand you know everything is right and you have the legs and the super shape, then you can have some days that you just smash out all your competitors. And yeah, it's like you said, it's art. It's you can't expect him to do it the same every Tour de France, which then you can see the time trial like this, which you can't, even when he starts. Normally, last year there's a bit of a consensus when you never will start too hard. So you see guys starting at their TT, and they immediately go to their aero position just to make sure they never go above the target watts. And now when Jonas launched, I say, oh, he starts really hard. I think after in the first corner he already took 2 seconds at Pogacar, and I thought, oh, he really. I thought, oh, now he's a bit off pace, but he just kept that pace for 20k. So it was it was a piece of art, and you can only you can only admire what he did, and say the numbers he produced on a TT bike, which is also quite hard. It's not easy to produce the same watts on a TT bike as on a normal road bike. It demands a lot of training, a lot of core sessions, because it's really hard to go in that position to transfer power from your back into your legs. So they did everything. I think they tried to make a perfect plan, and somehow he managed to cope with the perfect plan, and then you have those brilliant results.
And because he never blew up in the time trial, but at the finish line he was completely empty. So he like exactly emptied himself for the TT. And
perfect.
Yeah. And
like you said, I think it was a perfect TT. It's it's really hard to pace. Sometimes it seems easier than you think, but to pace a time trial right where you just run out of energy at the finish line, it's really hard. And now they did everything perfect. Is like his bike handling, his positioning, everything was 100% correct, and then you can blow away your competitors.
And I read that he had the same CDA as Remco. That's how aero you are on the bike, 0.15. That's very low.
Yeah. So I'm curious now. What we want to see is a time trial battle between Remco and Vingegaard at top level. I think Remco always was by far the most aerodynamic cyclist on a TT bike, and now with Vingegaard produce the same CDA numbers, and I'm really curious whether. I'm curious for the battle in Vuelta. I think Remco has a bigger chance than Vingegaard just because of the preparation. But when they're both in top shape, I'm curious.
Yeah, me too. And you also have Juan Ayuso going to the Vuelta. He in the Tour de Suisse he had one bad day and he was dropped, so he didn't win GC. But 2 days later, I think on high altitude, he also produced insane numbers, and he's only 20. So that's another good competitor for the Vuelta.
Yeah, I know you're a big fan of Ayuso, right? But I think, of course, he's one of the big names in town. But of course, I can be wrong, but I think he needs to have the experience to win in 1 week races before he can go through a 3 week race. I think he will fight for the podium, but I'm curious if he gets in the lead, which is possible. It's also the factor how you cope with the stress and the pressure of defending lead the jersey. It's also important. Again, it's not only about pushing the watts, because he has the watts, that's 100% sure. But it's also all those guys, all those leaders of the teams, they have the ability to win stage races. It's just at one point it matters how you can cope with stress from press, from your teammates, how you handle with those bad days, because everyone will have one or two bad days. How you hide it, and I think for Ayuso, maybe we should. He has not yet shown he's a real winner. He has the talent, he has the capacity to be one of the biggest heroes in cycling, but to expect immediately to win a 3-week GC, I think it's a bit hard. Definitely against guys as Roglic, who wins almost every stage race he starts, against Remco, who also wins or goes for a win every race he starts. And those guys have like mentally and also with the experience, they have a little bit of advantage, I think, in just next to the physical capacities, which might be the same, they have that other part that now they have more experience in it. So I think that will be for Ayuso a question mark how he handles with it.
I also think that Ayuso will never be a super 1 week race rider. Like he's obviously going to win some in his career if you see how he rides. But he seems like the type of guy that has very good fatigue resistance, that copes with a Grand Tour better than his competitors. Like he just never never drop off or almost not drop off.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, he has the physical capacities, and if I had my own WorldTour team and I had unlimited budget, I also try to buy him because he has it in him. But there's still, he has to prove he also is mentally ready, or he has the capacities to really lead out the team to the victory. So, but I'm a believer, but I just don't think he will be ready for this. He will be ready, but I think Remco and Roglic will be one step ahead of him in GC.
Okay. Like also one of the reasons that I like Ayuso is his perseverance. Like last year, the stage where Roglic took time on Remco, he had a mechanical and he had to go further on a Shimano bike, and he just all the riders would like suffer from that, but he just rode on at the same pace on the Shimano bike.
Okay, then you're mentally prepared for for hard battles. If you have the confidence to go all out on a Shimano bike that comes from the Shimano cars, then you don't break easily mentally. But we'll see what happens.
It's going to be, I think, the best Grand Tour this year. Like Vingegaard normally is a level higher, as you said earlier, but yeah, the tour with the combo with the tour isn't exactly easy. Like he isn't going to do an altitude camp, obviously, because he needs to recover from the tour first. But the Vuelta is already starting in a month, so it's not easy.
That's for me the biggest question: how they will handle it. If he now goes for the win in Vuelta, I think other teams will have no idea how they can beat him in the future. Now it's clear you need to do your altitude camp as close as possible to your to the start of your Grand Tour. And now he has of course he had a huge effort block during Tour de France, but now you can't say he's off the bike, but this is now for the moment he's not resting. He's going from one celebration party to another, and mentally it's also that's not taking a break, because you're from morning till evening, you're in a car or in a plane, or you have to be all the time have to be at events, and it's not relaxing. So you can't say he will be super fresh, and then you need to start training again, because this level of cycling needs to, in this kind of cycling, every detail has to be correct. So I was already surprised he didn't go on altitude. I thought he would leave this weekend, probably with the family, so they can have some time together. But he stays at home. So normally that will cost him some percentages. So I'm really curious how it will work out. And that's also why I think Roglic will be the final leader of the Jumbo team.
Yeah, I'm also very curious to see how they are going to handle that with Jonas at training, but also how they are going to handle that with Roglic, because like last year's tour, it was tough for Roglic with his crash. Then he needed to Domestique for Jonas, like he likes Jonas, so he didn't seem to think that was that he didn't like that. But it always hurts to Domestique if you are such a big star as Roglic is, I think.
Of course, but it will be talked through with the team, and cases like that, if it's not determined before the start of the race, it always, how to say, it takes care of themselves. During the race, all kind of situations happens, and then you need to focus at one certain moment. Okay, or Roglic or Vingegaard lost due to whatever 1 or 2 minutes, and then you must be able to switch. It's not that one of them will have to pull from kilometer zero. They will always be in the final, and then you can always play with them. It's better to have a teammate with you in the final, but it's not that, because I never expect one of them will have to do an effort before the final. So in the end, it won't really matter, and then one of the two will break or will lose time because of circumstances or because lack of fitness, and then you can switch.
Talking about Grand Tours, I was convinced you did a Vuelta once, but apparently I was wrong. But like, how hard is it to do a Grand Tour, like a type like you or a Tim de Klerk, like guys who need to ride on the front in sprint stages, but need to survive in mountain stages, basically no day off.
Yeah, okay. So I haven't done a Grand Tour, but I did races like Dauphiné and Tirreno, and so I can compare a bit. I think now the level of the staff of the teams and the level of training is so high that normally if you don't crash or you don't get sick, normally you're always able to finish a Grand Tour. Of course, you're going to suffer, but now you also see there's not so many dropouts. If you hear a guy abandoned the race, it's always because of a crash or he got sick. What can, and the luck for us, Tim was a better climber than I am now. No, definitely because I don't ride my bike anymore. But but there are always sprinters in the team that climb less. There are lesser climbers than you, so you always know. For example, but with all respect for him, like Groenewegen, this year he climbed quite well in the Tour, but I did race with him where he drops way ahead of you, and the team will wait for him. So you don't have to stress to get in time. But what is a factor for us, what's quite annoying, is on some easier stages when the peloton has an easy day and you have to pull all day, that makes a big difference. I know Lampard told me once 3 years ago during the Tour, they had 4 or 5 really hard stages. Then there was a quite easy stage, but he had to pull to defend the jersey of Alaphilippe. All day headwind, the whole peloton was relaxed, and Yves had to pull all day, again, kill himself, and then the next day when they race again, then of course you feel the difference between having a rest day and pulling all day. And that's why it's important for me also when I was in Domestique and I had to pull. The moment the job is done, you just swing out and you go relax to the finish line. And some guys really want to stay in the bunch, but when your job is done, take every second you can to recover, to be fresh for the next stage, even if it's for only 10K, but you just nobody cares how much time you lose. I think most of my races, I think I never finished, except when I was lead out. With all the other times, I never finished in the bunch. I did my job. I went all out the last time, my last effort, and then I sprung off, and then I went as slow as possible to the finish line. And nobody cares if you're 50th or 70th or 160th. Nobody cares. So, but that's in those moments you can take your minutes, your active recovery, and in the end of a week when you have it costs maybe it's maybe the difference between trying to follow the peloton for 1 hour, so 6 times 10 minutes to follow all out when they go to the sprint, or you can just relax and that can make a difference in the end. And I think that's how, if you do a grand tour and you're not the best climber, that's how you try to survive. You know you're going to suffer during the mountain stages, but when your job for the team is done, you can drop and you can go as easy as possible to the finish line.
For like an example, for a heavier rider in the Grand Tour, Jonas Rickaert, he said he weighs 88 kilos at the moment. So I can't understand how you can ride a mountain stage and then the day after do a lead out. Like, how can you still have the energy, because he did a few strong lead outs this tour? Like, that's how,
definitely. He was really strong in lead outs. Jonas, first of all, he has a huge engine, and then again during the real mountain stage. Now this year there were a lot of mountain stages where you had the first part of 80k quite flat, and then finish with two mountains. So you know if you arrive on the first mountain in the bunch, you can take it quite slow, and then they climb at around aerobic threshold, because they know the real sprinters will suffer more than they do, and it's still a hard stage, but they will never be completely dead until in the end you see the last mountain stages they struggle more than other riders, because when they race and it's uphill race, they burn more sugar, they produce more lactates, the body has to recover more. So in the end, it's also hard for them, but it's not that they have to kill themselves every mountain stage.
The Vogezen stage, the first climb of the day, Rickaert did like 35 minutes at 450 watts, and that's like the first climb of the day, and then there are another 6-7 climbs coming. That's so tough.
Yeah, but it's not easy for those guys. It's not that they're not going just that they don't kill themselves, but it's still they have to produce the numbers. They still have to be in top shape to be able to do this every day, day in, day out. But it's true that problems also the climbers now, they go so fast, so you need to level up to make sure you get time cuts. But that's why you train months and months and months and then you're able to have that level. But normally, like I said, if you had a good preparation, you went on altitude, you did what you could, the food is good, the recovery strategies are all right, and you don't get sick or you don't crash, then normally you will suffer, but you will get to the finish line.
Going to another topic now, the World Championships. In Quickstep last year, there were two very interesting riders, in my opinion, Honoré and Schmid. Honoré is now at EF. They seem two riders that can win classics, but I feel like they have a better potential than what they are showing. How you know more about them, because you rode in a team with them.
I think Mikkel 2 years ago he was really impressive. I think when he finished third in Plouay, those months he was, and I think it was a goal at that moment it was a goal to launch him as a classics rider, because he really showed in the one-day races. In the second part of the season he was really world level, but then I can't remember. I don't know if because I think in the end last year he didn't race in spring season. I don't know what happened, but I can't remember I was in classics with him. Maybe I'm wrong. But somehow he didn't make it. He don't have the level he had 2 years ago. And now in EF, I think they are they don't have that real classic vibe, because that's also a strength of the team when you really have the focus on classics. It produces something extra. It's hard to explain, but the tension and but positive tension towards those classics in the team also, it gives an atmosphere that makes you want to push it extra hard. So, but I don't know what went wrong with Mikkel. And Mauro, I think Mauro clearly has the potential to be a classic rider. He has the physical abilities. If I was the team, I would have put him in Tour de Flanders selection this year, because I think he's made for that classic. The only problem with Mauro is physically he has everything a classic rider needs to have, but again, he's not so strong in positioning. He's a bit, when it's stressful in the bunch, sometimes if he has space, he can go so fast, but when it's a bit hectic in the bunch, he quite easily loses the wheel of his teammates. And in other classics, in races like E3 or Glasgow Vlaanderen, where the race is decided on 1 point, that's really important. Tour de Flanders, when it's more the fatigue, that it's just about fatigue resistance and your physical capacities, and less about the way how you move in a peloton, in a bunch. So I think in Tour de France you would have a chance. But still to beat guys like Pogacar and Van der Poel and Van Aert, it's still another level. But I think he must be able to do a top 10 in those big one-day classes.
It also seems to me that maybe I'm wrong, that he doesn't train a lot, maybe a bit too less, because like his volume, he shares everything on Strava. It's just not that much, and he always seems to get better after stage races. So could that be a thing, or?
Well, normally, actually, I don't follow him. I don't follow him on Strava, so I don't really know what he does for the moment. But normally, when you have your team camps, and you should think normally the team follows him up follows everything, and I think he has a trainer from the team, so normally they know what they are doing. So it's quite, I would say, it's quite new to me actually. I just think it's because of his, maybe indeed he doesn't get he doesn't get as tired as other riders during races, possible, but I don't know a real explanation for that.
Another interesting rider, I think, who won a Giro stage this year, Brendan Mcnulty. I think he has the potential to be like really good in Ronde van Vlaanderen, but also Luik-Bastenaken-Luik. Like he's that type that can do both, I think, because he's not very light, but he has such big watts that he can climb, that he still can climb, but because he has those big watts, he can also ride very well in Flemish classics, like he in the race Remco won, Brussels Cycling Classic. I think the race was a bit tougher in 2021, and he also rode a good race there. So I don't think positioning is a problem. So I don't understand why UAE doesn't put him in classics more, like, or World Championship, like a really tough race. I think that suits him perfectly.
Yeah, and definitely with the level now, you see, since the change of the circuit of Tour of Flanders, nobody would expect it 5 years ago that a guy like Paulus or a guy like Madouas would have been a guy to produce results at Tour of Flanders. And now it's changed. Now it has changed. Just the level is so high, and now more and more the lighter guys. Problem is the more heavy guys, they do burn more glucose. They, in the end of the race, they're getting more tired than the more light guys. So I think indeed a guy like Mcnulty who has the potential. It's not he has the potential in how he rode. I think last year in Tour de France, was insane level he had. So indeed, he would have he could go for his chance in a race like Tour of Flanders. I don't know if he does the Worlds. It will also be a good check now how he doesn't do it. But it's also every team has his own goals, and for some teams they focus on the stage races or they focus. For us, Tour of Flanders is a really important race, but like races as, for example, Dwars door Vlaanderen, some teams they don't really care about it. Just because we are in Flanders, we think it's one of the biggest races of the calendar. And so maybe they think, okay, you focus on Giro and you do the perfect build-up towards those races. But if he was in let's say he was in Lotto or he was in Quickstep or he was in Alpecin, yeah, definitely he would be in the classic squads and to check what he's able to.
Yeah, I think he would be an interesting signing for Quickstep. Actually, he could be the perfect domestique for Remco in the Tour, and he could combine that with a classic season.
Indeed, yeah, that's one of the guys that's really interesting. Yeah, those are the guys with races. It seems like every year races getting harder and harder, and then in the end, the bigger guys they have every year they have less races to show themselves. And if you're a team and you want to, if you know every year the races get harder, a guy like Mcnulty is a dream guy to have in the team because, like you say, he has all capacities. He knows how to climb, which is probably the most important for the moment. And then he still has the capacity to go in one-day race to go out. So I would definitely ask his price, but I think he's pretty quite expensive. I think he's a quite expensive rider.
I think so too.
And he deserves it. He deserves it. So.
Another thing I didn't ask about Grand Tours yet. I find it mind-blowing how riders can still produce the numbers they do in week 3. Like a personal thing, if I'm really, really tired from cycling, when I really went completely empty, I really don't sleep well. Like, how can a rider sleep well and recover in a Grand Tour?
Well, what you need to know is as soon as the race finishes, the only thing that matters is recovery. So let's say the race finishes at 5 o'clock. 10 minutes later, you're in the bus, and until the next day in the morning, it's all about recovery. Firstly, with feeding strategies. But once your body has again the energy to recover, then most of the guys already sleep in the bus for most of the time. Transfer is like an hour, 1 hour and a half. A lot of guys just already sleep for 1 hour in the bus. And then during the night, what you saw the whoop files during the Tour de France, most of the guys sleep 6 hours and a half, 7 hours and a half. It's not perfect, but again, you train for months and for months for those for the race, and the body adapts. You at some point you don't have the hours to sleep, but your sleep quality is still quite okay. So that compensates a bit. And then, of course, when they're at home now, 2 days after the tour, they all crash because now the body realizes, okay, it's over. But somehow a body is able to, as long as you have the focus, a body is able to produce the same energy, and when the race is ended, your body will collapse. But that's problem for later. That's not during the race. But you do everything. The only thing that you do everything to recover, and you do everything to make your body ready for the next day. And 15 years ago or 5 years ago, there was a big difference. And now you see they know for the moment it's like they know everything, how to manage everything to have a body ready for the next race day. And then you're able to race 3 weeks on a really high level.
And talking about Whoop data too, I saw a comparison between Meeus and Philipsen. And Meeus slept 9 hours before the Champs-Élysées stage. And I thought, like, how can you squeeze that in a Grand Tour?
Yeah, it was late start. I don't know what
Yeah.
they what they did, but normally, yeah. But everybody has his own rhythm. The main problem with short shoots, normally you have some days that you can only eat at 10 o'clock in the evening, and then you know you will have probably a short night. But if you arrive on the right time in the hotel, you can have lunch, or you can have dinner at 8 o'clock, and then maybe you can sleep already at 10:30, 11, and then if the race starts late, you can sleep till 10 o'clock if you want. So I don't know how it was with the transfer, but it is possible. It's not possible every stage, but and some guys need it. Some guys are happy with when they have 6 or 7 hours of sleep. Everybody has his own preferences of sleeping hours and how to sleep and when to sleep.
And Meeus was maybe one of the biggest, if not the biggest, surprise in the Tour de France for a lot of people, I think. You were in the bunch with him, obviously. Did you know that he had that in him, or?
I also didn't expect him to win on Champs-Élysées. But when I was riding behind him, you see he's a powerful athlete. You see a nice style on the bike. His body is quite, for a sprinter, he's still quite skinny. Or he's not super muscular, so you know he's not the guy who will explode in the mountains. So when you see him riding and you saw his sprints, you know he has the potential. But I must admit, when they showed when it was announced he would replace Bennett, he would go instead of Bennett to the Tour de France. It was a little surprise for me because it brings a lot of pressure to you have to replace the big guy of the team who has won already some stages at Tour de France. And the most positive thing I think is his first sprints weren't good, but if you can recover from it and you win the biggest sprint of the year, then it shows you both physically as mentally you're able to be a future top sprinter.
Yeah, like I don't think he has the abilities to beat Philipsen in the week 1 sprint, but because he is so strong, he gets stronger relative to the rest in week 2, week 3 from the Grand Tour.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, okay, and that shows that's a really good sign for a guy in his first Grand Tour. He's still young, and it was his first Grand Tour, I think. So then you show you have the potential. If you're not totally squeezed out after 3 weeks of racing, it shows your body can manage a huge amount of stress. And there's a big difference between ending a Grand Tour wasted, because then probably you won't recover for the rest of the season. But if you come out of a Grand Tour with such a sprint, then if you take some rest, then probably I think his next big race would probably be Renew Tour. I don't know, but that would be a quite logical decision. Then his sprint will improve. Not the only sprint itself, but also his capacities to survive during the stages. He will get fresher and fresher, and I think with the Tour in his legs, he will be able to win a lot of races in the next months.
And the last topic of today, the World Championships. I don't know how you feel about that course, but I have the feeling that because people just look at the altitude meters and at how much kilometers there are, they think not that hard of a race. But a friend of mine calculated how much corners there are, and
Yeah,
each 300 meters a corner. That's
yeah. I this morning also had an interview about the World Championships. But it's hard to count what's a corner, what's not a corner. But I come at about 50 corners a lap, 50, 90-degree corners. So 10 laps is 500 corners with some small steep hills on it. The course is quite wide, so I don't know how they will do it with the fences, if they will narrow it, if they will keep it really wide. But still, I think it will be one of the hardest races of the year. I think chances of a bunch sprints are almost zero. I think I think if you look at top 10 of Tour de Flanders and top 10 of World Championships in Leuven, and you add Remco in it, then you will have the favorites for the race. That's how I see it. I think the moment they enter the local laps, if a team takes full control and they go all out for 2 laps, I think maybe they will end up with 20 guys or something like that. Because I think so many corners, the stress in the peloton, I think once you're in the back, I think your race is lost. And so I think it will be, even in dry conditions, I think it will be a hell of a race. It will be so hard. Just if you have to do 50 corners, it's like a criterium of 280k, so it's impossible.
I think, you already made the comparison with Leuven. I think that was one of the hardest races in like the last 10 years. I remember Stuyven first did some work for Wout van Aert. He closed gaps and still got in the group for second at the end. I was analyzing his file because I'm going to make a tweet about it, and he did 410 normalized power for 6 hours. That's I've never seen that.
Insane. I think you will have the same. Now I think the race won't open as soon as in Leuven, so I think they will, unless if there's wind, because the first 120k is just open field. There are 2 climbs in it, but they're not really hard. But it's always open field, so if there's wind and they make echelons, it will be the hardest race ever. But if the weather is good, I think it will be quite easy until they go to the local laps, and then the last 2 hours and a half, it will be the hardest 2 hours and a half of the year, I think.
I think I think guys like Mats Pedersen, Van Aert, maybe even Van der Poel, like you said, they burn more energy because they are heavier riders. I think they might burn out of energy like the last hour, and that we'll see more like Pogacar, Alaphilippe, Hirschi, those types to win it, I think.
Yeah, I think also with Remco, I'm curious about Remco, because normally when he trains, normally must be, his main goal is Vuelta, and normally I would say is normally you would think he won't have the anaerobic skills to really produce all those sprints. So I'm curious how that will turn out. Maybe if he again goes like last year, if he goes with an early attack and he can ride his own pace, because if the corners are wide, you can, as a leader, you can take them quite smoothly. So that will be a question mark for me, how he will race. But then the other guys, I think it's on the limit, but I think it's still doable for Van der Poel and Van Aert. Because I think the race will split quite early. But it will be limits. It's hard to produce. Say if you take top 10 of Leuven, it was a mix of classic riders and some climbers. I just don't know if the real the real climbers won't have the speed and the acceleration, I think, to survive the first splits. And then in the end, I think you will have a mix from those strong climbers and the classic riders, and then it will be interesting. I think it's for trainers. It's one of the hardest races of the year to prepare a guy, because it's a race of 280k, and still you need to be ready for 1,000 of sprints. And I'm really curious how they will manage it.
Like, yeah, that's what Alaphilippe suits best. But yeah, the last 2 years he hasn't been at that top level yet. He always, when he won Imola and Leuven, he showed some of his best form in the Tour, but always died out to the end of the Tour. But then had that super compensation at the World Championships. Do you think he can now reproduce that, or does he just doesn't have it anymore?
I think 2 years ago, Alaphilippe was unbeatable on this race. Now in the Tour, you saw he tried. You can't say he wasn't good, because in every stage with a hard start, he was in the break. But you saw he raced with the same mindset as he raced in his top years. But now you saw he didn't have the physical capacities to to catch up with all the attacks. He was too enthusiastic, and I think he won't have the level to become world champion. I think I was a bit in the past when he attacked in races, you saw he immediately could make gap, and now you saw when he attacked, guys could follow him and they could counter him, and then he had to sit down and then hoping to be the last one for the gap and be like that in the break. So I'm afraid he won't have the level to become world champion. It might be his best race of the year, because I think the way he raced, he prepared himself the same way as he did before Leuven or before Imola. He tried the same way, but I think he won't have the level to become world champion.
And Marc Hirschi, that's another interesting name, I think. He obviously has a potential too. He had a lot of bad luck the last 2 years, but he now seems back to close to his top level. He won a Spanish race, like I can't remember the name, but it was a very good performance because the watts were very high. It was pretty insane, to be honest. Do you give him a chance, or?
He's a strange guy. Last year he's always really good. The week before the Worlds, again, what he showed yesterday, it was yesterday, I think. Again, it shows he has the potential to be one of the best cyclists in the world. But the problem with him is there's no consistency in his results and his level. And again, it's a 280k race. I think that can make a difference. If you talk about still the Hirschi of his last year at Sunweb, again, he would be one of the real big favorites. Now it's always with a slight doubt. You never know how good he will be. Does he have the potential to ride top 10? Yes. But I think for this World Championship, I think we need to look at the 5-6 real big stars of cycling. I think those are for the moment, those are the biggest favorites to become world champion. And then I get always with guys like Pogacar, Van der Poel, Van Aert. I don't know if Mohoric will ride, but he also won't ride. And I think we get Paulus again, Van Baarle. those are the guys I think that will be. Those were the guys I think for me are the main favorites.
Talking about Mohoric, he was he was the guy that I thought was going to be world champion, and then he said he isn't going to ride because he feels like he doesn't have the level. But like, how can he think that after this tour?
Yeah, if you if you can do it, if you can produce a tour like Mohoric did, you always have the level, and he showed already so much class in his career. I was already surprised in his interview. I was already surprised a guy like him suffers in the bunch. I always thought I was the guy who I was the guy who was suffering, but so he's such a good rider, and I hope he changed his mind because he really, and on this course he has it would be one of the favorites, but of course
Yeah.
also mentally he had his spring season, then with the death of Mader, it cuts in your mental capacities. Then Tour de France again, 3 weeks where you really need to go, where you really need to push it every day. So I can understand they say, the world's it's a bit too much for me. But I hope it changes his mind because on paper it looks like he's one of the guys who can finish it off, and it would be a nice world champion also. So
Like what you said, the race is tougher and longer than most races that exist. But that's exactly what Mohoric is good at. Like he can
of
keep
course.
riding.
This is going to be harder than or at the same level as the monumental classics. It's 280k. It's 6 hours of racing. There aren't so many guys in the peloton that have the level to produce the watts for almost 6 hours. Then it's a bit of a shame he won't start because you saw in the classics he's also one of the, when it's Tour de Flanders or Roubaix, he's always one of the big he's always there in the final. So I don't see why it's bizarre for me that he says that he won't have the level because there are maybe in the world on such a course. I don't think there are 7 guys better than him. So
And if you have to say one name for the World Championship, who do you think it will be?
I still go for Wout because I know it is indeed possible, like you say, he will be in trouble in the last hour because of his higher weight and his that he burns more glucose, more energy. But I think he got off at Tour de France in the right moment. Now he has some days to recover. With his freshness, it's all to be technical. It's all about VLA Max. With his freshness, it will rise again. So explosivity will rise, and I think there will be, and with all the corners and the short hills so I think for me is the main favorite, and I really hope he can become world champion.
I think everyone would love that, and maybe we saw it in. It's not comparable with both worlds, but his first son, he got energy out of that to win the Belgian championships in cyclocross. He looked like he didn't slept for weeks, but he still won the race. Maybe he can get the same energy for Glasgow.
But that's something really strange. How environmental factors can affect your physical abilities. We always say also a cyclist that's in love, he always rides 5% harder. And the same with the birth of your with a kid, the first weeks you fly. I think I had the same when my daughter was born. It was 2 or 3 days before Bing Bang 2 years ago, and it started with an Ashland stage, and I think everybody said it was a really hard stage, and it was like I didn't have to push my pedals just because of the happiness you get from the birth of your own kid. It really can make a difference as long as you can sleep enough and you so let's hope it can be an extra factor, because happiness, if you feel happy outside of cycling, it also affects your results.
That's a nice one to end the podcast, I think. That's a wrap for today's episode. If you want to see even more watts, type in hashtag Domestique Data on Twitter to see analysis from races. I did, and thank you to the guest of today, Stijn Steels.
Yep, you're welcome.
I've got the spores, the sickness. There's the twins in my brain.